Hi, and welcome to the library.
Hi.
This is the nerd.
Hi, nerd here.
And I'm the tourist, and this is our podcast. So we're longtime readers, first-time podcasters.
It's really nerve-wracking.
Yeah, we're slightly terrified, so bear with us for this first episode.
Yeah.
So we thought that, since we're recording for the first time today, we'd sort of do this sort of introduction episode where we just kind of introduce ourselves and top 10 books that we love most, so that you know what we're all about.
Okay, so hi. Nerd here, long-time reader. I'm super awkward, such a big nerd. I'm still in university, but otherwise, I just read a lot.
Yeah, same here. I'm not a student currently. I'm taking a break, saving up for university actually. So I have a lot of free time on my hands, and what else should I fill it with than with books, right? So I think I have quite a range when it comes to reading. I can, I go from classics to complete sci-fi to ironic weird shit, right?
Yeah, I'm mostly a fantasy fan, but classics are kind of a thing for me too, especially like I said, I learned a lot in university and I've been introduced to a lot of books there, not necessarily all classics. Some were fantasy that we're doing now, but yeah, fantasy is kind of my main thing. I generally just like to read everything and a lot, but yeah, fantasy.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for fantasy as well, definitely.
I think most of us do,
Yeah, the reading community is such a fantasy-based community, right?
Okay, so should we get into our topics?
I think we should. So yeah, the topic we chose for the first podcast is top 10 books, just so that you guys can kind of get to know us through the literature that we love, right? So do you want to go ahead?
Okay, so my number 10 spot goes to The Secret Garden. This book just gave me a warm, cozy feeling when I was reading it. It made me feel really soft and warm and squishy inside. I don't know how else to describe it, because it is a children's book, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed reading it. I really enjoyed Mary's character development, and it really reminded me of Bilbo Baggins for some reason, because he was just like this snarky, kind of selfish, spoiled kid, goes on this journey in just becoming a person who is not so spoiled anymore, because she meets people that went through different circumstances and different experience than her, and I think she starts looking at life a little bit differently than she did before, and I think it was the same for Bilbo, even though I can't compare the war to a kid going to a house and discovering a secret garden, but still it reminded me of that a lot.
Yeah, so wait, I haven't read this one, so what's the story actually about?
Okay, so this little girl loses her parents and goes to live with her uncle in the English countryside, and there she's kind of left by herself and she's extremely bored, she doesn't know what to do, and then one day she discovers this little secret garden. And I don't want to go into the story too much, but just the characters that are there each have such unique personalities that help Mary develop as this little girl, and this little girl becoming not a selfish little girl anymore. So that's all I want to say on that because I didn't want to spoil it too
Right.
much.
That sounds like a really good story for kids to read.
Yes, definitely.
So that they can see, like, sort of, they have this role model of how to grow up or how to develop into a better person. It definitely sounds like it's kind of a guide for them, you know?
Yeah, it's okay. So you're a selfish kid, snarky kid, unlikable kid, but that's okay because you still have time to grow out of it, and you need to have that process of growing out of it. And it's okay to not start out this perfect child, you know, this perfect picture child, you know, but take your time and develop even as a kid.
Yeah, because you're actually developing as a human being your entire life.
Exactly.
So, like, why should we expect, especially from kids, to be perfect immediately, right? So
kids need to learn, and they need to know that it's okay, that they don't have to be perfect all of the time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, that's a really good one. My number 10 spot goes to All the Crooked Saints. So it's basically, the story is there's a small village of Bichoraro, I think that's what it's called, in Colorado, and they have a saint there. It's a person that performs miracles. So like pilgrims come to that village, they're called to it, sort of. They come in, he performs the miracle. It sort of makes them the thing that they don't want to be first, and then they have to perform the second miracle themselves so that they're unburdened. And the village is just filled with pilgrims that can't perform the second miracle because the saint isn't supposed to help them, right? Because if they do, horrible things happen. That's all I'm gonna say. And it's such a good story. It's really quick. It's a quick read. It's quirky, it's fun, it's really funny, like, but in not sort of that ha-ha way. Just the things that happen are so ridiculous that you're like, okay, I have to laugh, right? It's sort of like, if anyone's ever read Night Vale, it's like that book, but better. Like, I did not like Night Vale. It seemed like it tried too hard. This book tries just enough. It is perfect. And the characters are fantastic. You fall in love with all of them, even the ones that are annoying, and you really like want to shake them and are like, do you know what you want to do? Then do it, right? The other thing that I wanted to point out is it's Mexican culture, which I'm not familiar with, and it was really interesting to read about it because it created this sort of warm atmosphere of just everyone loving each other, but in secret. So it was a really good read. I read it last year, towards the end of the year, and it's definitely in my top 10 because it just stayed with me. It resonated with me. The characters are so good.
Okay, so I haven't read this one. What made you put it on the list? So what was the one thing that you said, okay, I love this book enough, it's in my top 10?
Oh yeah, it's just the feeling that it gave you. You really felt like you belonged in that village next to those people who were like suffering, because you know, every person has their own struggles, their own like shadows, and they fight them themselves. And these people were also forced to sort of fight their own battles, but their battles were, you know, seen. It's like, okay, there's this person in the story that has a rain cloud over her all the time, and it's raining on her the entire time, right?
Wow.
You know, it's like her misery has manifested, right? And like, that's what happens to all the pilgrims, but like their troubles manifest in different ways, right? So it's like this group of people suffering alone but together, and you sort of feel like, okay, maybe there I could belong, you know?
Wow, that's actually amazing.
It's a really interesting story. It's such an interesting concept to have, like, what kind of a world would we live in? Would we be more compassionate to each other if our struggles were visible to each other?
That's actually a really interesting concept that you think about. Like, what if you could see another person's struggle? It would definitely create more compassion.
Definitely, yeah. Would we be nicer to each other, or like more like helping to each other and stuff like that? I think we would.
So, okay, my number 9 is another classic. This list is full of classic as well. And it's actually Shakespeare's Hamlet. I've read it about 3 times, and we discussed it in class, and I still don't fully understand every single thing about it. I think it's just so nuanced and complex. It's not an easy read, definitely not, but it's very interesting, and I love this idea of waiting for the hero to get revenge, and then waiting and almost I know he's dead.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to say spoiler alert, but if you don't know that Hamlet dies in the end,
then you're living under a rock, honestly.
I love this idea of a hero not actually accomplishing what he set out to do, but actually failing at it.
It's the original non-cliche.
Yes, definitely. And I know Shakespeare has a lot of tragedies, but I think Hamlet stands out for me as this classic story of revenge with the subverted ending, you know. You don't get that satisfaction. And one thing that our professor pointed out, he said that it's not actually confirmed that his uncle ever killed his father, and I didn't know that.
Oh, you don't realize that? Oh, I haven't realized that either.
Yeah, so it's, like I said, I read it 3 times, we discussed it, and I don't still fully understand every little thing about it, and that's what makes it so great, in my opinion.
Yeah, I read it twice, but the first time I read it, I was in high school, and I don't think I was mature enough for it.
Of course.
You know, like, I didn't get it. I understood the story, but, like, the value of it for me wasn't there. But then I came to university first year, and we read it, and I read it again, and I was like, holy shit, this is literature. This is fantastic. It has all the elements. It has drama. It has, you know, love. It has sadness and tragedy. Definitely.
Sabotage. It has, you know, backstabbing. It has
yes.
Everything.
Everything.
Like I just said, I just like that subverting of the hero trope, where the hero doesn't actually get revenge in the end, and everyone dies. I mean, just the point is that the hero dies without ever getting revenge, and that's something so rare and so ballsy.
Yeah, so ballsy, and that's just the thing, because you have this expectation, and it's building up, and it's building up, and you're like, yes, he's gonna succeed, and then no, goodbye. Fuck all your expectations.
Exactly.
I am going to kill your hero.
Yeah, and that's why it's so perfect for me.
Okay, cool. So, my number 9. I almost went to number 8, you know.
Oh, don't.
My number 9 is Gather the Daughters. Oh, I have such a hard time saying this title. It's such a mouthful. Gather the Daughters, right? It's about a cult on an island that's like separate from society as a whole, and they have really weird rituals, and it's kind of unsavory because, you know, there's a lot of abuse and pedophilia, stuff like that. It's really like not for the faint of heart. It's sort of like a dystopian society style book, but it really makes you think about the role of women, especially. The story is really gripping, right? It just does not let you go. I did not let the book go for a whole week. And the language is really good, right? But it does really focus on suffering of women, the pressures that their society puts on them, which can be kind of translated into the pressures that other societies put on their women, you know, because we here still experience a lot of suffering and a lot of pressure as women, but like there's other societies that have it way worse than us currently, right? And that's still happening. And you read this book and you're like, holy shit, how can this happen at all anywhere? This cannot be real. But it is. And it makes you think about that. It makes you realize that the world is not perfect and you should really, really think about other people.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of relates to your number 10 because, you know, it's kind of like thinking outside of yourself, outside of your experiences and what other people are suffering, and you don't often realize it, especially with this book. Like I said, if you're not a woman, you don't understand some of the struggles.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it goes for not just women but for minorities and other marginalized genders as well, you know.
Definitely, yes. And like this was a society that only let men and women exist, you know. It didn't even let anything else, like and kids weren't allowed to express themselves in any sort of way, and like everyone was pressured into their roles, and like, you know, girls had to go out and like were kind of forced to have sex with other boys while they were still kids, you know, and they were forced to like pleasure their fathers.
Oh my god.
Right? And it's just, it is really unsavory, but the reason I really love this book is just because of that. It makes you think, it makes you appreciate your own privileges, your own life, and it makes you more compassionate to other people. Right?
And it's good that it makes you uncomfortable.
Yes.
That's good, because if you're not uncomfortable, then
there's something wrong with you. If you read this book and you're not uncomfortable, there's something really wrong with you. Go see a therapist immediately.
Yeah. Okay, we can go on
Yeah.
with a lighter topic this time.
Okay.
My number 8, another classic, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
Yes.
Yeah, I love this novel. It's so wacky and weird and random and all over the place, and that's why I love it, because I think it works. For Lewis Carroll, it works. And I think my love for it stems from the Disney cartoon as well, because it's how I got introduced to it.
Yes.
But also, I relate to Alice a lot. Just this aspect of daydreaming and kind of thinking, okay, I'm dreaming all this wacky stuff. It's perfectly normal. It's just a figment of my imagination, and I'm totally capable of conjuring up birds with accordions for the next. Like, that's totally normal for me, and that's why I love it, because Alice, after being in Wonderland, she kind of just goes with it, like, this is normal for me, okay, I can dream up stuff like that, and that's why I love it. It's so kooky and quirky, and I love it.
So you are Alice.
I think, in a way, yes, especially when I was a kid, I could definitely see myself as Alice and coming up with such weird and kooky creatures. That's why I relate to her so much, because I also was able to come up with this world of my own Wonderland in a way.
Oh, that's so nice. I did read this book. I read it last year for the first time. And like the same as you, I fell in love with the cartoon. It was my favorite cartoon when I was little. And I picked up the book and I couldn't quite relate as much as you did. Definitely not. But I could definitely see the appeal. It was so like wonderful and beautiful, and just such a great book, such a nice little like comfort read, you know. If you just want to get cozy and read something nice that'll make you smile and like leave you with good dreams, you should definitely read this book, right?
Yeah, I definitely definitely agree. And it's, it's children's literature, so you can read it yourself, or you can read it to your kid if you have one. And it will work just the same, because the kid will definitely experience it in a different way that you will, but it's enjoyable for both. It's
multi-generational.
Definitely. I think it's something that even my grandma or grandpa would probably like.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's been around for so long that a lot of people have grown up with this book that are from different generations,
Especially some of them might have grown up with it as a primary children's book,
Yeah.
So, just a wonderful book. Yeah.
Just wonderful.
Wonderful, yes.
Okay, so my number 8 is actually a trilogy. And it's the Southern Reach trilogy, which I told you about.
Okay.
It's a sci-fi trilogy, and it's like the story is basically there's a sort of a catastrophe, and it sort of triggers this anomaly where nature decides to just take the world back.
Okay.
But it's seemingly really unnatural, It's creatures that we don't know. It's plants and species and stuff that we don't know. And it's all held back behind a wall. And so, they send teams of explorers into the area to gather samples, to try to understand the area. But most of them do get corrupt by the area or, never return, right? And it's mysterious. It's full of suspense. You feel this sort of urgency all the time, but the thing that bothered me, because there is one thing, you do not get all the answers.
Oh.
By the end of the trilogy, you do not have all the answers, and you're still questioning whether you're sane or not, because it's just that insane. The story is so interesting, it's so gripping. You read it in a day if you have the time, but it's just so weird that you can't wrap your head around it. The concepts are sometimes so hard to understand that you just cannot imagine it. You cannot understand it. So it's kind of frustrating at times, but it works. It's really good. It's by Jeff Vandermeer, who is really known for those sort of books that lead you into an existential crisis at the end, right? And it's scary. So if you like suspense and something scary, this is a good one, because the scary parts are sort of how should I say it? There's a lot of space in between them. So you sort of forget that you're reading something scary, and then something terrifying happens.
That sounds brilliant, actually.
Yeah, it's really good.
Wow. It sort of reminds me of Attack on Titan.
Really?
Kind of like society that had to lock itself up behind walls because they were outside. They were getting eaten by titans. But
well, this is sort of the opposite, where they try to lock the anomaly inside, right?
The anomaly inside, okay.
Yeah, because it's small for now, right? But it's ever expanding, so they're having trouble with it, right? But it's really good. It's so good.
I definitely will read it.
Oh, please do. But do not watch the movie. Warning, do not watch the damn movie. They ruined it. They absolutely ruined it.
Why is it that this happens way too often?
So much.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Okay, so should we proceed with
number 7.
Okay, so my number 7 is The Outsiders. I'm not sure if you know it. Do you know it?
I think I've heard of it, but I have no idea about it.
I think the appeal of this book was just that I read it at the right time in my life when I was just frustrated about everything. I think I was 15, 16, or even a bit before, 14. When I read it, and I was in my rock and roll rebellious phase, and that book just sort of found me my space, if that makes sense. It made me realize that a lot of people, especially teenagers, are also struggling. I'm not the only person struggling, and even though I couldn't relate to any of the characters specifically, I could relate to being young and being angry and then doing something about it. But you know, you're young, you make stupid decisions, and that's what that book essentially is. There's a lot of class differences as well, and it's really hard to sum up in a way that would be satisfactory and not spoil anything. But yeah, and that's also where I first read The Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. It was in that book just set up perfectly, and I think if you're young and frustrated with the world, that is the book you should read.
I just remember that when we were talking about Robert Frost and Nothing Gold Can Stay, you mentioned this book, and I added it to my to-be-read list. Because I went to check it out. I was like, holy shit, that sounds like something for me. And that sounds like something for everyone, you know, because everyone can, you know, have struggles at different points in their lives. So, like, to go back to a book where it basically tells you that everything is okay, that struggling is okay, and that you're not alone, it's definitely something that anyone could relate to, no matter the age, right?
Yeah, I think the appeal that this book has is this 80s setting, even though the book I think came out in the 60s, but I'm not sure, but it just has that old-timey feeling, and it just adds so much more to the story, and I just love that. It deserves this spot in my top 10 because it's just good.
Just good. That's fantastic. We're at number 7, right? Okay, my number 7 is one that I read very recently. It's called French Exit. It's by Patrick DeWitt, and he's one of my favorite contemporary writers. I've read almost all of his books because he is just brilliant. All of his books are witty, they're ironic, they're like funny, and again, not that sort of ha-ha sense. You're just, okay, this is so weird that I have to laugh at this, right? It's just insane. They're quirky, they're just strange all around. Every one of them has a very unique storyline, and this one in particular follows this woman, Frances, who escapes to Paris with her son and her cat after suffering financial ruin. And I think they're in America. I'm not sure. Maybe they're in England. But I'm pretty sure they're in America. And it's just, the happenings are really strange. You follow this woman who's clearly like at the end of her wits, right? She's about to break. You have her son who is really strange, and you have this like bunch of other characters who also all add to the story. They're all really, really weird. They're all like, if you just looked at them, you'd think, okay, that can't be a real person, right?
Okay.
Because they're so weird. But then you listen to the way they talk and what they talk about, and, you know, the struggles that they have, and you're like, oh no, wait, this is a very real person. Very real people are very weird, you know?
It's so interesting to read about these normal people being weird, because in books we always get the kind of polished versions of characters, not this representation of people, you know.
The interesting part about this book, you have this woman who's supposedly rich, really high in society, everyone respects her, she's loved and everything, but then she does such reckless things, like take all the money she has and flushing it down the toilet, you know, and things like, even though she's already broke. Right, so in the end, because the end is fantastic, you understand her suddenly. In the end, you know exactly what she was about, but throughout the book, it's so hard to understand her actions, yet they're so intriguing that you have to follow them. And then and then I have to mention chapter 37. It is the best work that DeWitt has ever written. It is so good. It's just so immersive. It's scary, it's full of suspense, it's fucked up, and you're like, holy shit, how can this have happened?
Wow.
But it's just so good. And then it's like a slow letdown. Like chapter 36 is a slow build up, 37 ruins your entire being, and then it's just downhill from there.
Oh my god.
And it's really good. It's just,
Okay.
I really recommend this book.
I trust your judgment. Number 6?
Number 6.
Okay, so my number 6 is another kind of middle grade book, and it's The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman.
Uh-huh.
I love Neil Gaiman, and I've read only 2 books by him, both children's books, both on this list.
Coraline?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll get to
nice.
it, of course. But there's just sort of this macabre feeling in his books, and just turning these children's or middle grade books into gothic books, and I love it so much. And his villains, I'm sorry, but the man Jack, the main villain of the story, terrified the hell out of me. And I started reading Neverwhere, but I was in a different time in my life, so I stopped reading it, but I need to read it again. And the main 2 villains of that story, terrifying.
Really?
Terrifying.
Oh, I'll say, just if I can interject, I
Yeah.
read The Ocean at the End of the Lane,
Okay.
and that's also by Gaiman, and
Of course, yeah.
it also has a villain in there. Obviously, they all have villains in there, right?
Yeah.
That is just so terrifying. It's like, holy shit, no.
You can write, like, this is a middle grade book, and I'm over 20,
Yeah.
and I was terrified.
Yeah.
Terrified. And
It's the same with Coraline. Coraline is
Yeah.
fucking terrifying for a
That's-
children's book.
I love it because it's gothic books for children, and I love everything about that. And it's also, at the same time, if we leave the villain aside, it's just such a fun, relaxing read. When you're not terrified by the villain, it's so fun and so charming. There's this special charm about Gaiman's work that I just love.
Then you should really read Ocean at the End of the Lane, because
I'm
I
planning
think...
on reading every single book
Yeah,
of
yeah.
his. Definitely.
Me too, but like this one, I remember it resonated with me so much because it was the first book that I read written by him, and it was just so weird. It follows this little kid around basically, but like he struggles, right?
Yeah.
He's having trouble, but it's not normal trouble. Like, it's not trouble that kids usually have. So it's a really good book.
Yeah, he is he's amazing.
Yeah,
That's all
he's
I have to say.
excellent.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah.
Okay, my number 6 is Perfume. And I've reviewed this book on my Instagram, which we will plug at the end.
Definitely.
But it's basically, this boy is born in Paris to a girl in the fish market who just basically discards him because she doesn't want him. The boy has no scent of his own.
Okay.
But his sense of smell is really good, and he becomes obsessed with the sense of other people and things, right? And they obsess him so much that he becomes a perfumer, but then like something happens that I won't get into because I do not want to spoil it.
Okay.
But basically, he hates people. That's the gist of it. And I could really relate to that in a funny thing, right?
Yeah.
In a funny way, I could really relate to the fact that he just despised people. For a while in the book, he just wanted to stay away from absolutely everyone. And as a note, I will add, if you really want to understand the book and the feeling that it gives you, listen to Scentless Apprentice by Nirvana after it, because Kurt Cobain literally wrote that song about this book.
Okay.
And it just captures the feelings perfectly.
Now it makes me want to read it.
Right?
Definitely.
Oh, it's so good. It is so good. And it's just, it's the story of a murderer. That's literally the title, Perfume, the story of a murderer. And yeah, this guy, I think his name was Grenouille. if I'm not mistaken. He's just insane. but you kind of also understand him, you know?
Okay.
You understand where he's coming from. He was hated all his life. He was marginalized and he was pushed away, and he was always an outcast because he was always weird. And given, yeah, of course he was an outcast because he was fucking weird. But you also kind of feel for him, and you have this sort of hope throughout the entire book that maybe he'll change for the better, you know?
Okay.
It really grips you the entire way, you know? You can't let it go. It's a really good book.
It sounds really interesting and intense.
Yeah, and it makes you think about the relationships that we have with each other through scent, you know?
Okay.
Because, like, it's something that you don't really think about throughout the day. You're like,
yeah.
okay, if something is stinky, you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
But, like, other than that, you don't really think about the scent. But if someone came into your life without having a scent of their own, wouldn't you be wary?
That's really interesting because you do associate certain people with certain scents, which you can seldom smell when they're not around. And you're like, okay, I remember this person by the smell, or I remember this childhood moment when I smell something. But it's so weird to think about someone without a scent.
Yeah, because that's just the thing. You recognize people partially by their scent, right? You can't recognize him. You don't know he's there. You don't scent him. So, like, you smell him, sorry.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, stay away, please. And that's just the thing. That's how he's able to move. Like, he's sort of slithering like a snake right through life. Just because of that. Because he can get anywhere he wants. Because no one can smell him.
That's so insane.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It was terrifying.
Yeah, of
but
course.
It was so good. Really. I keep saying that about every book. It was so good. But it was really good.
That's why it's in your top 10.
Definitely.
Because it was so good.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5.
Yeah.
It's the second play, and it's actually The Crucible. I'm not sure if you know it. The first time I was introduced to this play was when I saw it in theater in Slovene, and from that moment on I was hooked. So it's about essentially the Salem witch trials and actual records Arthur Miller got about these trials. And once I saw it, I went to read the original English version, and then I went to see it again when we discussed it in class, and it's so powerful. And I'm not gonna spoil it, but John Proctor's ending was just catharsis embodied.
Ooh.
That's all I'm gonna say, because it was that wonderful, and I almost cried in theater when I saw it. And every time I read it, I imagine the Slovenian cast that was cast for this play, because they were incredible. The casting of this play was so incredible that these people are now permanently stuck in my mind as these characters.
Oh, now I really want to see them.
I think they might do a reprise at some point, because they did it but when we saw it in class, because I saw it a year before, so they might do it at some point, and if they do, go and see it, because it's fantastic, and just read the play.
I really have to.
Yes.
Now that you mention it, I really have to. I've heard of it before. I just never really looked into what it actually is. But now that you told me, and I'm obsessed with everything like gothic and witches and shit like that, so definitely
I think
this is for me.
Perfectly embodies what the Salem witch trials were about. It embodies it, and just that cathartic moment for John Proctor. Insane. I love it. I might do an essay on it at some point.
Now I'm obsessed. I am now obsessed. I need to read this book immediately.
You do, definitely.
Oh my God.
And if anyone gets a chance to see it, I hope that they go and see it, and I hope that it is done well, because, a play can always be messed up. But, it's such an incredible play, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who's not big into reading plays, to just at least go and see it because it's amazing.
Oh yeah, we definitely need to start going to the theater more as
As
like
soon
as a
as we
society. Yes, as soon as we can. But like just as the Western society, we need
Of
to
course.
appreciate theater
Yeah,
way more than we
definitely.
do.
I agree.
Okay, wonderful. So that was your number 5, right?
Mhm.
My number 5 is Withering Heights.
Oh.
A classic this time. And I just love this book. I love the Bronte sisters. I really appreciate. I've read all 4 books that I own. So
Okay.
I've read all 3 sisters. There's 4, but I think one
Yeah.
of them didn't write. I'm not
I think
sure.
I think that's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So I've read books by all 3 of them, and 2 of them are on my top 10 because I did read Tenant of Wildfell Hall and didn't like it as much.
Okay.
Appreciated it, didn't
Okay.
like it as much. But Withering Heights is just such a complex story. It's actually a story within a story within a story, right? Talking about this family and their struggles. There's so much love and hate and drama and just it's just beautiful and it's tragic. It's really sad, but it's just wonderful, and I really love the story. I need to reread it because I've like sort of forgotten everything that goes with it, but I just remember having so many feelings for each character because they were so well written that you do not like or hate any of them completely. Like they all have wonderful qualities and you're like, wow, you are my favorite, I love you forever. But then they do some fucked up shit. And you're like, okay, well, go to hell then, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's such a whirlwind of emotion because each character is so good and so bad at the same time, and you just can't help but have love for them, even though they do some really messed up stuff sometimes, right?
As an English lit student, I definitely should read it. And I definitely will read it. I'm planning on reading it because I think it's also partly gothic, and I love everything to do with gothic novels. So definitely, I'll be putting it on my reading list because it's a classic. You have to read it. So.
And the story itself is one of the best I've ever read. It's just so well done, you know, and it has. I think I can say that it has absolutely 0 plot holes. It just makes sense throughout the entire thing. Everything makes sense.
That's a statement right there.
It's a really good book. And it's sort of like, you know, a person starts like telling or it's about this person who comes to another person and that person starts telling a story. So that's the first story. But then within that story, someone else starts telling a story. So you really it's literally, like I said, it's a story within a story within a story because you just keep going deeper and deeper. It's just really good.
It sounds insane. I know what it's about a little bit. I don't know everything about I know a little bit. And it's intriguing. And I definitely want to read it. It's a family drama, and you're like, okay, if you think that your family is messed up, just read this book. You'll rest assured that maybe you're not as insane as you think that you are. You know? Okay, that's good to know. Okay, number 4.
Yeah.
Should we go on? Okay. Coraline. I mentioned Neil Gaiman before, so I want to focus on this book in particular. I think, like most kids, I saw the movie first before reading the book, but I did read the book, don't worry, and I related to Coraline so much. I'm an only child, that's the first thing, and my parents didn't neglect me, don't worry about that, but it was just this point where, as an only child, you're forced to make your own way, you're forced to spend time by yourself, and I think, like Coraline, my imagination was insane, and I think she's not like Alice in a way, but I think she still has this nature of an explorer, wanting to explore everything, and I think that's also where I related to her, you know, being stuck by myself and just wanting to explore everything. And like we said, the other mother, terrifying.
Holy shit.
Again, we're adults, but we're terrified.
Yeah.
We're absolutely terrified.
I've never seen the movie, actually. I'm one of those that has only read the book.
Okay.
I read it before the movie was even out. And I just never got around to watching the movie.
Honestly, it's the perfect adaptation.
Yeah.
That's what I'm gonna say. Studio Laika did an amazing job, and it does justice. Studio Laika is sort of like Tim Burton-ish feeling, and that's what works with Gaiman's work.
I am dumb. We watched the movie last year with my boyfriend.
Oh, then you know what I mean.
I just remember, it's exactly like you said, it's very Tim Burton style, except it's a little more twisted, a little more like strange.
Yeah.
Even stranger than, Tim Burton is. But yeah, it's definitely, it's terrifying, it works, it's perfect for what it is. And I really, I read the book when I was probably 10. And I watched the movie 12 years after that.
Yeah.
And it took me back. It took me back.
Yeah. I think I read this book in both English and Slovene. So I got that experience out of it. And just the movie adaptation. Perfect. That's why I'm hoping if the Graveyard Book gets an adaptation, Studio Laika, do it. Please. Because I think they're the only ones capable of doing justice to Gaiman's work. Because it requires a Tim Burton-ish character to put this into life. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say on that.
Yeah, I only read it in Slovene, the book, when I was 10, obviously. And I think I'm gonna pick it up again. But in English, I really want to read it in the original. I want to see if the feeling's any different.
It's such an experience. Like every Gaiman's work is. It's an experience, it's an adventure, and it's incredible. Of course.
Of course. Okay, my number 4 is one that you know very well. It's The Priory of the Orange Tree.
Okay.
And I'm talking to the nerd here. I don't know if anyone else knows it well. I hope you do, because it's just a fantastic book. It is high fantasy. And what I really loved about it was the world building was happening from 4 perspectives on 2 different parts of the fantasy world. Right? Completely separate from each other, but slowly coming together. The other thing I really liked about the book was the fact that it introduced very good female characters without being overbearing, without it being, oh, here she is, the female goddess, worship her now, she is a badass. It was just, they just were badasses, no one had to say, oh, you're a badass. And the same goes for LGBT characters. The LGBT relationships in the book were so effortlessly put into it that you didn't question it at all. Right? It wasn't weird, or I wouldn't question it anyway, but it just wasn't
forced.
Yes, exactly. It just existed. It was just there, and none
of the forced
yes.
for the sake of representation.
Yes, and none of the romances in the book I felt like were forced. I think they were all very organic, very well written, but didn't take away from the actual story, which is important because sometimes books focus too much on the romance aspect and sort of forget about the plot. The only thing I didn't like is towards the end the book felt rushed.
Yeah, agreed.
It felt like, okay, I don't have the energy to write anymore. I know what I want to happen. I'm just gonna type it out quickly, and that's the end of the book. I kind of wish that the I don't know, at the 500 page mark, it would cut off, and then other 300 pages were expanded into another 500 and a separate book.
That's what I said as my main criticism of this book, because if you take such a big universe and such a scary villain who, by the time you get around to him, isn't that scary because it's so rushed. And so I really wish that this was split into 2 or 3 books. I know if the author wanted only one book, then maybe they should have fixed the pacing.
Yeah.
I think maybe don't linger in certain aspects too long and then focus on this one big bad. Otherwise, split it into several books because it would have worked. And I think that's the only reason why they don't have it on this list.
I mean, I really fell in love with it. I thought it was gonna be a project book because it's a really long one. I thought I was gonna like use up a month or two to read it. I ended up reading it in I think a week at most. But the ending was really disappointing because you have this big bad villain that's like you're building up to him the entire time. He's a bigger and bigger threat every page you turn. But then they beat him so easily.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, spoiler alert, but if there's just one book, you kind of knew that they beat him, right?
Yeah.
So it's, it was this sort of disappointment. It kind of left me wanting more, right?
Of course. And it's such a big world that, and some of the characters, I think we discussed the Don Matamarosa.
Yeah.
How I loved her, and she had 1 or 2 scenes, and that was that. And she was so complex, so intriguing, and
she kind of just
disappeared.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So I thought that. Oh God, I don't remember his name. Queen Sabran's friend.
Yeah. I don't remember his name.
Well,
sorry.
He was sent to like the Don Matamarosa. And I thought that something was gonna like happen between them. They're gonna form some sort of relationship, friendship. Something is going to happen.
Anything.
Yes, and I thought that she will have a bigger role from that point on. But you don't even know what happens to her. You don't know if she lives or dies. You don't know where she is, what she's doing. You just have no idea. Maybe she was corrupt. Maybe she was killed. You have no way of knowing because like she just drops off as a character. Like you hear nothing about her anymore.
And the guy that we mentioned, his point of view was the most boring of them all.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, that's why it's not in my top 10 because it's a bit lackluster.
I also didn't like the fact that they introduced Samantha Shannon introduced a character at the beginning and set it up as if we're going to follow his point of view a lot. Okay. But then you know what happens to him. I don't want to say it, and it just drops off, and I'm like, maybe he should have had a bigger role.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the POVs were just unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think it would have been okay if it were split into just 2. One in this part of the world with Sabran and the other in that part of the world with Tane.
Yeah.
That would have been enough.
Also, Tane is the warrior, right?
Yeah.
I've forgotten the names. There was this like rival warrior that she had that really hated her.
Turasa? No.
No.
Something on T? No.
No, the guy. There was a guy, and I thought it was so sad that
he also drops off.
Yeah.
He was interesting.
They had such a good dynamic going. Like, I thought, okay, this is going somewhere.
Yeah.
But then it just didn't. So, like, I really love the book. I have a soft spot for it, and that's why it's in my top 10, and I'm definitely gonna read it again. But I do have to, like, full disclaimer, it has some, like, it's a little lackluster.
Yeah, definitely.
Some holes.
Yeah, sadly. So moving on to number 3. Speaking of fantasy, you know this was coming. A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I love these books. They are fucked up in some cases. Of course, there's incest, but there's also backstabbing and plots and subplots and this giant world that's so perfectly explored, and you really feel like this is an actual world, you know. Like I said, I'm reading Fire and Blood, so this is the history of House Targaryen, and it makes you feel like it's an actual history, you know. And these books. So one disclaimer: the reason I didn't put The Witcher on this list is because I haven't finished the series, so it's a bit, you know, hypocritical that I put A Song of Ice and Fire on here because it's not finished, but I love it that much. It's just that good, but it is a project, definitely, because sometimes there's so much going on, and there's so many books. They are all so thick, and there's a lot, but I love this aspect. If we leave the White Walkers and the threat beyond the wall aside, there's no clear villain. They're just people fighting for the throne, and you can decide who you support based on their character, and I love it. We're not gonna talk about the TV show because it was just a disaster.
Especially the ending, right? The last season.
Like the first season, so book accurate. They did change a few things that were better handled in the books. Rape, where there wasn't rape. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, the books are brilliant. Just brilliant. Again, that's why they are number 3 for me, because they're just so insanely good.
Well, I haven't read them. I haven't read a single one, and I am afraid I probably never will.
Okay.
Because I have such an aversion to it, just because of the fact that I have trouble remembering names of like characters and places, and I'm so like repulsed by that, just because of the fact that I know that I'm gonna be like looking at the appendices all the time, like having to take notes and just like running through the book and not actually immersing myself like I should, and that's the reason I probably never will pick up the books. But I do have a lot of respect for them and the author as well. Just wonderful. I've heard only good things about them. My boyfriend loves them, and I fully support anyone who loves them, right? They're just, I will never.
There was the one thing I was so scared about, because I'm scared of books that don't have like a lot of fast pacing, because I have troubles concentrating. But the thing about this book is that you always have to pay attention to what's going on, because sometimes the most trivial conversation will end up being so important to the plot, and that's what I find so brilliant, and that's why I can partially forgive Martin for writing them so slowly. I can't forgive him because it takes a lot of effort to write something like that and make it good.
I remember talking to Professor Gappai. We were talking about the fact that Martin said that some writers are gardeners and some are architects.
I remember that one.
Is it that? Gardeners and architects?
Yes.
I think
some take a lot of time to plan.
That's
everything. The architects.
Yeah, and he's the gardener.
Because he just plants a seed and lets it grow.
Yeah.
And I find that so amazing. I think I mentioned that in class, because you could never tell that he just planted a seed and let it grow.
It's such a hard thing to do. I think you have to really be a talented writer to sort of remember all of these details that you put in, to include every single thing that you write into, like, coming back into the plot at some point, because that's the mark of a good writer, of a good author, is if you mention something once, it has to have some significance later. Definitely. You can't just mention it once and never mention it again.
And with him, you're speculating about every single thing, and most of them, like 90% of them, are of huge significance. And that's what's so insane.
I don't know how you can come up with that and like keep track of all of that.
Course.
Like I
Yeah.
cannot. I think that's
Of
another
course.
reason why I'll never read the books. It's because I just cannot keep track of everything.
Of course.
I can't even keep track of everything in my life, like all the plot points going on. How am I gonna keep track of this?
Yeah. But yeah, just incredible.
I'll take your word for it. So my number 3 is, I think no surprise, it's Dune.
Okay.
I contemplated putting the entire series in it, but I haven't read the last 3 books. I've only read 3, and out of the 3, the first one is definitely the best.
Okay.
It's basically space wars, space politics, right?
Okay.
You know it,
Yeah,
you've
I
read
know.
it. But what I loved about it is sort of the same reason why you love A Song of Ice and Fire, because every conversation is significant. It's just on such a smaller scale that you're able to, follow the plots without getting too confused. So yeah, every single conversation is brilliant. It's good. It's insightful. It's deep. It makes you think. It's just it leads to something greater. The characters you can get too attached to because tragedy strikes at every corner, right? But just like the entire plot is, I think it's really interesting. You have these planets that are basically fighting each other over drugs, right? And over control of the universe. And you're on someone's side, you're on Paul's side. But sometimes you don't agree with the things he does, or you don't understand why he does them. And I think that's also good writing, good character building, because obviously you cannot have a character that's completely perfect.
Definitely.
I hate when that happens, right?
Yeah,
That's just not realistic. And with him, he makes mistakes, and those mistakes are sometimes like fatal or like horrible, have horrible consequences. And I think it just shows his progression and his growth through the entire first book already. And then the second one just kills you.
Damn.
It fucks you up. And then the third one is even more insane. But, let's stay with the first one. But the writing is really good, I think. You're sort of thrown, it's in medias res, right? You're thrown into the happening without knowing what the hell is going on. But you sort of find out as you go, very slowly, but nothing is explained. This is so weird. Nothing is really explained. You just kind of find out on your own.
It works because you don't have this outside character experiencing these new things, and characters in the story already know what they are. And that's the one thing that I mentioned to you when I was reading it. I love it and hate it at the same time. Spoiler alert, I didn't like the book as much as you did, just because of the pacing, because of my issues with concentration. It wasn't the book for me, but the atmosphere I loved. I was thirsty all of the time when I was reading this. It really makes you thirsty.
Because like listeners, if you don't know, Dune is a planet of its own, and it's basically all desert, and water is scarce, but that's where they get the spice, which is basically a drug that everyone uses to prolong their life and better their health, right? So like everyone's sort of addicted to this drug that you can only get on this planet, but it's a decrepit sort of like, shitball of a planet where nothing grows and nothing really lives and nothing really survives, or that's what you think, right? But yeah, it's really good. It's so complex, and it's such an interesting story and an interesting concept, which was also sometimes hard to understand because they have, like, their systems are so different from ours that sometimes you had, or like at least I had, a hard time following simply because it was something that was so unfamiliar to me. But other than that, I really loved it.
I didn't, simply because of the pacing, but I would say the way that I describe this to you was Star Wars meets Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's basically that. It's basically that, except there's a little less action.
Yeah.
Like, the action
That's
is...
what set me off a bit. But purely, it's just a subjective thing with me. The book wasn't bad by itself. You know, it was actually good. It's just my personal preference, you know.
You have people that you hate so much in the book. That's the thing I love about books. Weirdly enough, you have to have someone to pour all of your hate into.
Definitely.
And that book does it very well. The Baron can go fuck himself.
Yes, he can. Okay. Number 2.
2, right? Okay.
We're making it towards the end.
Yeah, progress.
So this will probably be no surprise to anyone. It's Harry Potter. I have to put Harry Potter on here. It's just, we grew up with it. It's nostalgic for us, and I can always identify with one or more characters, and it does have a lot of plot holes. I will just say that, but I can forgive it because the characters amazing, the story amazing, the world, oh my god, the world amazing. But you know, it has some flaws. Almost every book has some flaws, but it's what we grew up with. Even though, you know, it's leaving a bit of a sour taste in our mouths
right now because of J.K. Rowling and her, you know, internet antics. And
I think if they just took away the internet from J.K. Rowling, this would have been fantastic. But I think this would require a separate episode of its own.
Yeah, definitely.
But Harry Potter, of course, just the 7 books by themselves. I'm not gonna count everything because that's a rant. An episode is required for that rant, but I will just say it is brilliant. It is brilliant.
The story just really grips you. It pulls you in. It's really interesting. Even though there are plot holes, the world building is so vast that you kind of forgive that.
Yes, definitely.
And it's like I haven't read the books probably in at least 8 years. Whoa. And I am ashamed of that. But I've only read them in Slovene.
Okay.
So I have a plan this year that I'm
That's
gonna
be
buy.
a transition for you.
Oh, definitely.
Because I read, when I was beginning to read them, I read the first 5 in Slovene, then I had a couple of years break, then I read 6 and 7 in English, and it was a mental transition because of the names and the way that the names are translated. But otherwise, I reread them every summer for at least 5 years. Last year was the only exception because of all of the antics going on, and I was basically boycotting them in a way.
That's I had this sort of weird hate for the series for a while, and I'm not sure why. I was just like, ugh, I'm over this. This is children's stuff. I am a grown-up now. No, realistically, these books are for literally anyone. Yeah. Yes. So I got over that weird hate that I had for it, and I'm sort of slowly falling back in love with it, and that's why this is my project for the summer. Okay. I really want to read them again this year.
I think the only reason they are above A Song of Ice and Fire, which is an objectively a better book series, objectively, but they are more feel good and just overall have a better vibe, and like I said, we grew up with them.
And they're easier to follow.
Of course, they are way easier to follow. And also, I just want to add, I love the transition from middle grade to full-on YA because they grew up with us as the readers.
Which they did with the movies as well. Although I don't want to say the movies ruined a lot of things compared to the books, right? Definitely. They took out way too much. Some things that they didn't have to, they skipped.
if you watch the movies without ever reading the books, they're good.
Yeah.
Once you start reading the books, they're not as good.
Then you realize, especially the first one.
Yeah.
The first one is such a disaster. I cannot believe that got so big as a movie.
Yeah.
But it got big because of the book, right? Because the book was already huge before the movie even came out. So yeah, definitely. If you like literally living under a rock and you haven't read Harry Potter yet, you should.
Just pretend J.K. Rowling didn't write them.
Yeah.
And maybe borrow them, don't buy them.
Yeah. Just try to separate the artist from the art, right?
Definitely.
Okay, my number 2 is probably no surprise to people who know me. It's Convenience Store Woman.
Okay.
I have raved about this book to absolutely everyone who was willing to listen, right? It's by Sayaka Murata. It's a Japanese book in the original. And it follows this woman who is basically society's outcast, right? Japanese society and Japanese culture is still very tradition-based. So it's good that you get a good education. Women have to marry, have babies when they're young. It's sort of like this cultural thing where things are expected from you, and the main character, I think her name is Kaiko, if I remember correctly. She just does not want that. She's always been weird, even as a child, and she just works at a convenience store half-time or part-time, I think, and doesn't make much money, but she has no ambition. She's comfortable where she is. She has a really small, crappy apartment. She doesn't want to get married. She's not interested in love. She's not interested in sex. It's just not her thing. But because of societal pressure, she makes it work.
Okay.
Right? So that's kind of the basic plot. But in the end, and I don't want to spoil too much, but in the end, it really shows where her roots are.
Okay.
And she's not gonna move, her roots are set.
That's so good to read about an average, ordinary person. That's nothing special, but they give you so much because they maybe just like you.
Yeah. The thing is, she's a convenience store employee. You think, okay, nothing special. But she was made for that job. It is her job. She loves it. She understands it. She gets it. So, why not? I always said that I'm a born secretary. It's okay, that's not really ambitious, is it?
Yeah.
But it's the perfect job for me. So why not a convenience store employee? Why not a gas station worker? Why not, a cleaner or something? Why not? We limit ourselves to these high-paying jobs and these jobs that bring you respect and shit like that. And why should we pressure ourselves to do something like that if we're born to do something simple?
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with being just a convenience store woman.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong.
Definitely. I mean, in the end, it shows that every job that we do is really important for the workings of society. So even if it's not as respected as it should be, honestly, because it should be. I work in retail right now.
Oh my god.
Let me tell you, it should be fucking respected.
Don't get me started.
But yeah, what I wanted to say in conclusion is, do not let society make a diamond out of you if you're a piece of coal and you like it.
That is perfect. Just perfect. Okay, and we made it to our number 1 spots.
Hell yeah.
So I think before I say the name of the book, I think I have to chalk this up to the book coming to me at the right time in my life when I needed it. And that is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. It's my absolute favorite. I relate to the main character so much. I'm so awkward. I'm so shy. I will never come up to someone and say, hey, you wanna be friends? No, that's not me. I will sit in the cafeteria reading my book, and I think a lot of what made Charlie have sort of this semi-normal high school experience was getting the right friends, and that's also very important. And I feel like it's also important to know that certain groups of friends might not work for you, but certain groups do, and they will bring out the best in you. And just, I think every teenager should read this book. They may not necessarily identify with every single aspect of every single character, but they will definitely find something they can pick up and make it their own. And that's what I loved about it. For me, it was Charlie and his sort of shy, introverted way of experiencing the world, but also there were parts of other characters that I could identify with. So yeah, this is why this book is so perfect. My number one.
Well, I haven't read the book. I did watch the movie, but I don't expect that it lives up to what the book is.
It's fairly similar because the author wrote the script for the movie, so they just left out maybe one or two things. But it's a very different experience because the movie was perfectly cast. Let's leave just Emma Watson's American accent aside. It was perfectly cast, but this book works perfectly in book form. It works in movie form, but it works better in book form because it's first person, and it just allows you to get into Charlie's head better.
Okay.
So yeah, my number one.
Plus they're all like mentally ill, right? So that's something a lot of us, ironically and sadly, can relate to.
Yeah,
right?
It deals with mental health in just a very good way. You know, it's not in your face. Charlie isn't an introvert, and that's his entire personality. You know, he's got his own personality, but he just happens to be an introvert. And I love the way that this book highlights how the right teacher, especially in high school, can help you a lot.
That's interesting. I had an experience in high school where I was at my lowest point, and I had a teacher that more or less literally saved me when I couldn't save myself.
Okay.
You know, she helped me so much. I will hold this person in my heart forever because she noticed something was wrong before I even realized how bad it was. And she had my back through all of it.
That's incredible.
She really is. I admire her so much because she noticed, stepped up, and did the right thing immediately. And she really helped me.
And that's
so
the role a teacher should essentially play.
Yeah.
Especially in high school where we're at such sensitive ages, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, and what people don't realize enough is that it's not only your parents that raise you, it's also your teachers.
Yes.
You know, kids spend 8 hours a day, a third of the day, Yes. A third of the day in school surrounded by their teachers. So how are you going to say that teachers don't raise your kids? They literally do, right?
Definitely.
For 5 days a week, for 8 hours a day, you're surrounded by adults that raise you that aren't your parents. And they do play a huge role, and it can leave a huge impact. If they're good or if they're bad, it can definitely leave an impact on you, right?
Definitely. So should we move on to your number one?
To my number one, which is a classic. It's Jane Eyre. I love this book so much. I have such a soft spot for it because I was in a reading rut for a while. For like 2 years probably. I didn't read much at all. And then I started slowly reading, and I think I managed to read 3 books in a year. And that was huge for me at that
Whoa.
point, right? And then my mom and dad got me Jane Eyre for Christmas.
Wow.
And I read it and I fell in love with it. And I thought it was going to be a project read. I thought I was going to need a whole year for it. And I read it in probably like a week and a half. Came through it, and it's so good. The story is wonderful. It's really sad, it's tragic, but it's also like just full of light and love and happiness. You love all the characters, you know.
Definitely.
Jane is, that's the one thing that bothers me. Jane is perfect.
Okay, yeah.
Right? She shouldn't be that polished, but you go through her entire life, you know, from basically when she was a small child, being orphaned and in Lowood. Have you read the book?
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's orphaned and comes to Lowood, and that's basically where the story begins, if I remember correctly. And you just follow her through her entire life, and you see her develop into this wonderful person through her experiences, which are really harrowing. Easy. No, definitely not. You know, spoiler alert, she experiences the death of her best friend. She literally dies in her arms. You know, she has to go through leaving places, not being sure where she belongs, not being sure what she can do. She's homeless at one point. Yeah. You know, there's so many hardships that she goes through, and she triumphs through all of them. And she's just an amazing person to look up to. It's just the fact that she's perfect that bothers me. Right? She does absolutely nothing wrong.
See that.
Yeah.
If I can just mention the one thing, because we did this one in class, that's why I read it, and our lovely Professor Getby, she said this one line that I'll try not to spoil it too much, but she said, the character, so Jane said, and I married him anyway.
Yeah, and reader, I married him. That's the line. Reader, I married him. Oh.
I married him. And she said it was such a good line because in that time, women didn't decide who they married.
Yeah.
But in this case, she decided that she was gonna marry him. It was her choice.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's so incredible for me.
I just have to add a mini rant here. I had a professor of Slovene, right?
Okay.
When I was in uni, and we talked about books that we've read that we love, and I mentioned Jane Eyre, and he said, and I can't believe a professor of, you know, a language can say this. He said, yes, Jane Eyre, that doesn't really have much value, does it? I was like,
excuse me?
Hello? It's one of the most important Gothic literature books.
Yes.
You know, the language, if you read it, you have to read it in the original. I'll give him that. The Slovene translation is pretty bad, right?
Okay, I haven't read the Slovene one.
I haven't read the entirety of it, but I read excerpts, and it's not that good. But that doesn't mean that suddenly the entire book doesn't have value. It has so much value. The Bronte sisters did so much for women in literature. The characters were so complex and different. You know, it was something really special. Like you said, women deciding for themselves, that's unheard of. The language is just beautiful. The flow of the book is wonderful. And I never went to that professor's class again.
Fair enough. Of course.
I never went.
I mean, literature has value, and the one thing I want to add is, even if it's generally considered a bad book, if it influenced at least one person's life in a good way, then it has value.
Definitely.
And
yes.
That's so underrated, because we've all read bad books.
Oh,
we all have. But I mean, no two people experience one book
the same way. Exactly.
And you can see that with our top 10s.
Yeah.
Because we have such different perspectives on the same books. And they're the same books, the same words on the same page. Not exactly the same pages, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think that's so underrated.
And I think it really goes to show, our top 10 lists, none of the books are the same. And we have read the same books, a bunch of them, right?
Yes.
And it's just a different top 10 list, different completely.
And I'm surprised that not even one book is the same, much less in the same position,
Yeah, exactly. I was actually scared that we're gonna have too much of a similar list for us to do a good episode.
It wasn't even close.
No, it was really good.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm
Okay.
really, I have to say, I'm really happy with how we've handled the first episode.
Definitely, yeah. Considering we're both nervous and I've been mumbling along. So yeah, I think it went really well.
I hope so.
Me too.
For the listeners' sake.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty glad with what we discussed today. I think this was a really nice sort of intro to our personalities, our preferences, and what we want to talk about. Definitely we'll go into some different topics over time.
Yes.
We'll talk about different things. But
Different
for now,
books, different topics, different authors.
definitely. But for now, I really think we rounded it off very well.
Yeah, definitely. And so spontaneously as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we just started talking and that's it. I'm glad we managed it.
Okay.
So I guess this is us signing off now.
Yeah.
The library is
It's
closing
closed,
for today. We'll open again next month. Until then,
Stay healthy, stay safe,
yeah,
try and read as much as possible.
and definitely try to have fun.
Yeah, definitely. So, bye guys.
Goodbye.